2020 at 2882 kt, plus 94 / plus 3.4% YOY. 27. Intel plans to reduce carbon emissions 10% by 2030 from a 2020 base year. 28. Intel's annual total CO2e emissions, direct and indirect, in kilotons. December 2017, December 2018, December 2019, December 20202,461. 29. 2,578, 30, 2,788, 31, 2,882, 27. Corporate history. Origins. Andy Grove, Robert Noisy and Gordon Moore. In 1978, Intel was founded in Mountain View, California. In 1968 by Gordon E. Moore, known for Moore's Law, a chemist, and Robert Noyce, a physicist and co-inventor of the integrated circuit. Arthur Rock, investor and venture capitalist, helped them find investors, while Max Palevsky was on the board from an early stage. 32. Moore and Noyce had left Fairchild Semiconductor to found Intel. Rock was not an employee, but was an investor and was chairman of the board. 33. 34. The total initial investment in Intel was $2.5 million in convertible debentures, equivalent to $19.5 million in 2021, and $10,000 from Rock. Just 2 years later, Intel became a public company via an initial public offering, IPO, raising $6.8 million, $23.50 per share. 33. Intel's third employee was Andy Grove, Note 1, a chemical engineer, who later ran the company through much of the 1980s and the high-growth 1990s. In deciding on a name, Moore and Noyce quickly rejected Moore Noyce. 35. Near homophone for Moore Noise, an ill-suited name for an electronics company, since noise in electronics is usually undesirable and typically associated with bad interference. Instead, they founded the company as NM Electronics, or MN Electronics, on the 18th of July, 1968, but by the end of the month had changed the name to Intel, which stood for Integrated Electronics. Note 2. Since Intel was already trademarked by the hotel chain Intelco, they had to buy the rights for the name. 33. 41. Early history. At its founding, Intel was distinguished by its ability to make logic circuits using semiconductor devices. The founders' goal was the semiconductor memory market, widely predicted to replace magnetic core memory. Its first product, a quick entry into the small, high-speed memory market in 1969, was the 3101 Schottky TTL bipolar 64-bit static random access memory, SRAM, which was nearly twice as fast as earlier Schottky diode implementations by Fairchild and the Electrotechnical Laboratory in Tsukuba, Japan. 42. 43. In the same year, Intel also produced the 3301 Schottky bipolar 1024-bit read-only memory, ROM. 44, and the first commercial metal oxide semiconductor field effect transistor, MOSFET, silicon gate SRAM chip, the 256-bit 1101. 33, 45, 46. While the 1101 was a significant advance, its complex static cell structure made it too slow and costly for mainframe memories. The 3-transistor cell implemented in the first commercially available dynamic random access memory, DRAM, the 1103 released in 1970, solved these issues. The 1103 was the best-selling semiconductor memory chip in the world by 1972, as it replaced core memory in many applications. 47, 48. Intel's business grew during the 1970s as it expanded and improved its manufacturing processes and produced a wider range of products, still dominated by various memory devices. Federico Fagin, designer of Intel 4004. Intel created the first commercially available microprocessor, Intel 4004, in 1971. 33. The microprocessor represented a notable advance in the technology of integrated circuitry, as it miniaturized the central processing unit of a computer, which then made it possible for small machines to perform calculations that in the past only very large machines could do. Considerable technological innovation was needed before the microprocessor could actually become the basis of what was first known as a mini-computer and then known as a personal computer. 49. Intel also created one of the first microcomputers in 1973. 45. 50. Intel opened its first international manufacturing facility in 1972, in Malaysia, which would host multiple Intel operations, before opening assembly facilities and semiconductor plants in Singapore and Jerusalem in the early 1980s, and manufacturing and development centers in China, India and Costa Rica in the 1990s. 51. By the early 1980s, its business was dominated by dynamic random access memory, DRAM, chips. However, increased competition from Japanese semiconductor manufacturers had, by 1983, dramatically reduced the profitability of this market. The growing success of the IBM personal computer, based on an Intel microprocessor, was among factors that convinced Gordon Moore, CEO since 1975, to shift the company's focus to microprocessors and to change fundamental aspects of that business model. Moore's decision to sole source Intel's 386 chip played into the company's continuing success. By the end of the 1980s, buoyed by its fortuitous position as microprocessor supplier to IBM and IBM's competitors within the rapidly growing personal computer market, Intel embarked on a 10-year period of unprecedented growth as primary, and most profitable, hardware supplier to the PC industry, part of the winning Intel combination. Moore handed over to Andy Grove in 1987. By launching its Intel Inside marketing campaign in 1991, Intel was able to associate brand loyalty with consumer selection, so that by the end of the 1990s, its line of Pentium processors had become a household name. Challenges to dominance, 2000s. After 2000, growth in demand for high-end microprocessors slowed. Competitors, notably AMD, Intel's largest competitor in its primary x86 architecture market, garnered significant market share, initially in low-end and mid-range processors but ultimately across the product range, and Intel's dominant position in its core market was greatly reduced, 52, mostly due to controversial net-burst microarchitecture. In the early 2000s, then CEO, Craig Barrett attempted to diversify the company's business beyond semiconductors, but few of these activities were ultimately successful. Litigation. Intel had also for a number of years been embroiled in litigation. US law did not initially recognize intellectual property rights related to microprocessor topology, circuit layouts, until the Semiconductor Chip Protection Act of 1984, a law sought by Intel and the Semiconductor Industry Association, SIA. 53. During the late 1980s and 1990s, after this law was passed, Intel also sued companies that tried to develop competitor chips to the 80386 CPU. 54. The lawsuits were enacted to significantly burden the competition with legal bills, even if Intel lost the suits. 54. Antitrust allegations have been simmering since the early 1990s and had been the cause of one lawsuit against Intel in 1991. In 2004 and 2005, AMD brought further claims against Intel related to unfair competition. Reorganization and success with Intel Core 2005-2015. In 2005, CEO Paulo Tellenai reorganized the company to refocus its core processor and chipset business on platforms, enterprise, digital home, digital health, and mobility. On the 6th of June, 2005, Steve Jobs, then CEO of Apple, announced that Apple would be using Intel's x86 processors for its Macintosh computers, switching from the PowerPC architecture developed by the AIM Alliance. 55. This was seen as win for Intel. 56. Although an analyst called the move risky and foolish, as Intel's current offerings at the time were considered to be behind those of AMD and IBM. 57. In 2006, Intel unveiled its Core microarchitecture to widespread critical acclaim. The product range was perceived as an exceptional leap in processor performance that at a stroke regained much of its leadership of the field. 58, 59. In 2008, Intel had another tick when it introduced the Penryn microarchitecture, fabricated using the 45nm process node. Later that year, Intel released a processor with the Nehalem architecture to positive reception. 60. On the 27th of June, 2006, the sale of Intel's X-Scale assets was announced. Intel agreed to sell the X-Scale processor business to Marvell Technology Group for an estimated $600 million and the assumption of unspecified liabilities. The move was intended to permit Intel to focus its resources on its core x86 and server businesses, and the acquisition completed on November 9, 2006. 61. In 2008, Intel spun off key assets of a solar startup business effort to form an independent company, SpectraWatt Incorporated. In 2011, SpectraWatt filed for bankruptcy. 62. In February 2011, Intel began to build a new microprocessor manufacturing facility in Chandler, Arizona. Completed in 2013 at a cost of $5 billion. 63. The building is now the 10nm certified Fab 42 and is connected to the other fabs, 12,22, 32, on Ocotillo campus via an enclosed bridge known as the Link. 64, 65, 66, 67. The company produces 3/4 of its products in the United States, although 3/4 of its revenue come from overseas. 68. The Alliance for Affordable Internet, A4AI, was launched in October 2013 and Intel is part of the coalition of public and private organizations that also includes Facebook, Google, and Microsoft. Led by Sir Tim Berners-Lee, the A4AI seeks to make Internet access more affordable so that access is broadened in the developing world, where only 31% of people are online. Google will help to decrease Internet access prices so that they fall below the UN Broadband Commission's worldwide target of 5% of monthly income. 69. Attempts at entering the smartphone market. In April 2011, Intel began a pilot project with ZTE Corporation to produce smartphones using the Intel Atom processor for China's domestic market. In December 2011, Intel announced that it reorganized several of its business units into a new mobile and communications group, 70, that would be responsible for the company's smartphone, tablet, and wireless efforts. Intel planned to introduce Midfield, a processor for tablets and smartphones, to the market in 2012 as an effort to compete with ARM.71. As a 32nm processor, Midfield is designed to be energy efficient, which is one of the core features in ARM's chips.72. At the Intel Developers Forum, IDF, 2011 in San Francisco, Intel's partnership with Google was announced. In January 2012, Google announced Android 2.3, supporting Intel's Atom microprocessor. 73, 74, 75. In 2013, Intel's Kirk Skogan said that Intel's exclusive focus on Microsoft platforms was a thing of the past and that they would now support all Tier 1 operating systems such as Linux, Android, iOS, and Chrome. 76. In 2014, Intel cut thousands of employees in response to evolving market trends. 77. And offered to subsidize manufacturers for the extra costs involved in using Intel chips in their tablets. In April 2016, Intel cancelled the Sophia platform and the Broxton Atom SoC for smartphones. 78, 79, 80, 81, effectively leaving the smartphone market. 82, 83, Intel Custom Foundry. Finding itself with excess fab capacity after the failure of the Ultrabook to gain market traction and with PC sales declining, in 2013 Intel reached a foundry agreement to produce chips for Ultra using 14nm process. General Manager of Intel's Custom Foundry Division's unit Rick High indicated that Intel would pursue further such deals in future. 84. This was after poor sales of Windows 8 hardware caused a major retrenchment for most of the major semiconductor manufacturers, except for Qualcomm, which continued to see healthy purchases from its largest customer, Apple. 85. As of July 2013, 5 companies were using Intel's fabs via the Intel Custom Foundry Division: Acronix, Tabula Netronome, Microsemi, and Panasonic. Most are field programmable gate array (FPGA) makers, but Netronome designates network processors. Only Acronix began shipping chips made by Intel using the 22nm Trigate process. 86, 87. Several other customers also exist but were not announced at the time. 88. The foundry business was closed in 2018 due to Intel's issues with its manufacturing. 89, 90. Security and manufacturing challenges. 2016-2021. Intel continued its tick-tock model of a microarchitecture change followed by a die shrink until the 6th generation core family based on the Skylake microarchitecture. This model was deprecated in 2016, with the release of the 7th generation core family, codenamed Kaby Lake, ushering in the process architecture optimization model. As Intel struggled to shrink their process node from 14nm to 10nm, processor development slowed down and the company continued to use the Skylake microarchitecture until 2020, albeit with optimizations. 20, 10nm process node issues. While Intel originally planned to introduce 10nm products in 2016, it later became apparent that there were manufacturing issues with the node. 91. The first microprocessor under that node, Cannon Lake, marketed as 8th generation core, was released in small quantities in 2018. 92, 93. The company first delayed the mass production of the 10nm products to 2017. 94, 95. They later delayed mass production to 2018, 96, and then to 2019. Despite rumors of the process being cancelled, 97, Intel finally introduced mass-produced 10nm 10th generation Intel Core mobile processors, codenamed Ice Lake, in September 2019.98. Intel later acknowledged that their strategy to shrink to 10 nm was too aggressive. 2099. While other foundries used up to 4 steps in 10 nm or 7 nm processes, the company's 10 nm process required up to 5 or 6 multi-pattern steps. 100. In addition, Intel's 10 nm process is denser than its counterpart. Processes from other foundries.